Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, or good night, depending on when you're listening to this podcast episode. Welcome to the Vox Podcast. I don't know how to intro this piece. I think we're all equally excited, and now having done the interview, we're all equally, I don't know, what's the word?
Pensive.
Pensive, introspective.
I also feel like my work in the world...
Pondering.
Yeah, my work in the world is done. Like everything now will be downhill from here.
I learned what I want to be when I grow up. That's what I learned.
I thought that multiple times throughout, and we talked about this in the last episode, or like that idea of settling when you get to a certain age and just being like, all right, I'm done. I'm just gonna kind of I'm gonna put it in cruise control and kind of ride this out. And then you see a guy like this who is 87. Is that
87?
Is
87.
87.
I graduated in 89.
Not the same.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Close. But yeah, still trucking, still pushing, still like digging at things.
Well, who is it? Who is it, Tim?
I don't know. Mike Erie, who do we have on this episode today?
Let's just say we were given his personal cell number. And we are now, I would say, best friends with, Bonnie, would you agree with this? With Dr. Walter Brueggemann, who has written a book.
The reality is that Bonnie might actually be best friends with him in like a month or two.
Just listen to the episode and wait for the Gombus drop on someone new. Just wait. Wait. Were we talking yesterday?
How weird would it have been if I had said,
Bonnie.
"Oh, my person," and then he would have been like, "Why didn't she acknowledge?" Like, it would have been weird. So, you know what?
You'll hear it.
Jealousy takes many forms, Erie.
It does. It really does. And there is no doubt of the jealousy on my end. There is no doubt. Anyway, we are talking to Dr. Brueggemann about a book that he'd written about the coronavirus called Virus as a Summons to Faith. And
which, by the way, what did we do during quarantine? We didn't write books.
No, I did Virus as a Summons to Ice Cream more than anything else. Tim, you were Virus as a Summons to what?
I don't even know. Stress and anxiety.
Perfect. And Bonnie, Virus is a stress too. Or Virus is a summons to
the Peloton bike. The Peloton bike.
There it is. There it is. We'll let you at home be the judge as to which of those is healthiest. So anyway, we have Dr. Brueggemann on today, and this guy. We were just talking about it. There's a big difference between somebody who's a biblical scholar and someone who's a biblical theologian. So when we had Matthew Bates on, there's a biblical scholar. Tim Mackey, a biblical scholar. Dr. Brueggemann is a biblical theologian, and you'll just hear the difference. He's written, a zillion books. I probably own at least 10 of them. And anyway, it was a really great interview. And I think you'll enjoy it. I think he's very thought-provoking and interesting. And as we said, he's 87 and still alive and kicking, baby. Bonnie, any forewarnings besides just testimony of your popularity?
No, he also talks about racism and white supremacy.
Yes,
and he does it in this beautiful way, and prayer.
Yeah,
I mean, he hit all these major topics, and they all felt like they all flow. I mean, he was so good. It was awesome.
Yeah. Those are not these are not difficult interviews at all. You just try to get out of the way. So anyway, hope you enjoy it. You can find him online. His book is at Amazon and everywhere else. And again, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled today to be hosting one of the preeminent biblical scholars of our generation. And Bonnie, help me find adjectives for how big a deal this is. Would you use the word incredible, amazing? What should we use to describe our guest
maybe
today?
Incomprehensible.
Ooh,
The best ever. Yeah, I mean, I'm so
Handsome.
excited.
Yes. Yeah, so we get to talk with Dr. Walter Brueggemann today, who how many I know you've written over 100 books. What's the official count?
I don't think there is an official account. I think it's a few over 100, and at 87, I still have a couple in press, but I'm very close to the caboose.
No, I hope not. We have all very much benefited from your work and are grateful for the writings that have expanded our imaginations and how to engage current issues. And
Well, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And we hope you've got several more books in you. The one we want to talk about a little bit today is virus as a summons to faith. And that is obviously brand new. How long did it take you to write that? Obviously, you had some time in quarantine, but that was a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, well, it's a very small book, as you know, with a few little pieces. So I suppose it was about 3 weeks or a little more. I just did one little piece at a time, and had not thought it was going to be a book. But then I thought, well, we'll see what happens. So I sent it in, and there it was. Yeah.
And there it was. It just magically happens after 100 plus. You just send them a manuscript, and boom, out comes a book. With all of there's been much theologizing about the pandemic these days. So we've heard it's God's judgment against sin. This is straight out of the book of Revelation. This is a dress rehearsal for Christian persecution. We've heard it's God's way of getting our attention and calling out individual sin. As you sought to engage with biblical fidelity, the kind of where is God in the midst of this pandemic, are those appropriate ways of seeing what God is doing?
Well, I think you have to start with the awareness that the Bible is pre-scientific, and it does not immediately apply. We can't just read it one-on-one to our modern world.
Okay.
So if you accept those two premises, pre-scientific and no direct application, then it seems to me that we can think a lot of different things. And what I did was to take pestilence in the Bible as a rough equivalent for the virus. And then I looked to see what is said about pestilence. And the thing that struck me first about it in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, where my Bible hardly ever falls open, the pestilence is presented as an occasion for deeper faith, repentance, and humility. So I think that one can kind of skirt the question about whether God did this and whether this is punishment, and rather ask the question, how ought to be responding to this? And the response is a call that our faith should be deeper. And I think that the way is open for deeper faith, because what we are seeing is that our easier certitudes in our world have failed. Those certitudes represented by capitalism and all of those assumptions simply are not adequate for this inscrutable event, so we are driven deeper. And that was kind of the track I took about this as I tried to look at a variety of texts.
There are texts, though, that do see God leveling pestilence as punishment. What would cause you to pause on that interpretation if someone were giving it today?
Well, I think we live in a scientific world, so I think we have to be very careful about how we make those claims. But I don't have any problem with thinking that in ways beyond our explanation, that the virus is a judgment upon our pride, on our self-sufficiency, on our Western arrogance about being able to have the Bible on our own terms. And what the virus is making clear to us is that we don't have the Bible on our own terms. So we are driven to ask questions about the awful holiness of God. And I don't want to pin that down into an equation or a formula, but as I said in one of those little pieces, we do peek over into that question, and that occurs to us as modern people, even when we do not intend to think that way.
No, that is exactly.
So I think all kinds of people are being pressed in those kinds of directions.
So when you talk about, which is, and Bonnie and Tim chime in, that's so good. When you talk about having the Bible on our own terms, could you give a couple more sentences to what that means and looks like?
Well, I don't think that you can read something in the Bible and directly apply it. I think there is a playful zone of interpretation in which we exercise a lot of freedom and a lot of imagination, and we ought to be aware that that's what we're doing. The things we like about the Bible, we like to read directly across to our own time and place, and I think that's too easy and too simple. But we do get hints and clues and openings, but I don't think we ought to commit intellectual hara-kiri in order to make the Bible relevant.
Oh, got it. That's excellent. One of the things you identify in the first chapter are 3 different ways of explaining divine force. I'd love it if you'd go into those a little bit, because I think that was that frames this bigger question that we're kind of working around.
Yeah. Well, I thought I detected 3 trajectories. The first one is, as you've mentioned, transactional, in which God does bad things to people who do bad things, and there is no doubt in the prophetic traditions of the Old Testament that God is said to operate that way. The second way that I identified, if you think about the plagues in the book of Exodus against Pharaoh and Egypt, that God is presented as doing these harsh things in order to accomplish God's purpose. And God's purpose in the book of Exodus is the emancipation of the Hebrew slaves. So you could imagine that the Creator God has these tools to work with.
Yeah.
And after those 2, I considered the book of Job and said that sometimes the Bible tries to face into God's raw holiness that defies all of our explanations and all of our categories, so that in the whirlwind speeches of Job, what God says from the whirlwind to Job is, "Who do you think you are? You don't understand anything about this." And so I think that the situation we are now in, as quite different from the way we were before that, that to think about God's raw holiness that is loose in the world is an issue that we have to at least entertain.
Yeah, even with our so the Bible being pre-scientific, us being post-scientific, if you will, that sort of scientificness none of us are content with that, right? We can give scientific explanations all day for the coronavirus, but we keep searching for something bigger. Why is that, do you think?
Right. Why is that?
Yeah. Why do you see that happening? Even so, we can, we can analyze it, and we have diagrams of it, and we know how it interfaces with other cells. But yet, that's not enough for us.
I think we are created to ask ultimate questions, and when we dare ask ultimate questions, that pushes us even beyond our scientific certitudes.
Yeah.
Or our scientific wonderments, to ask, to really ask unaskable questions. And I think we are in something of a circumstance like that now. Yeah.
Right. Why, Bonnie, Tim, anything to add so far?
Not yet. I'm just taking notes, even though I have a paper of notes I took on the book. So that's all I have.
One of the interesting suggestions you make in another snippet of the book is when David chooses pestilence, as he's under judgment, and he's given, I think, 3 options.
Yeah.
And one of those is to have pestilence unleashed for 3 days. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
What do you do with that text? Because you take it a very interesting direction kind of by the end of that chapter. Yep. I'd love for you to get into that.
Well, I should say, first of all, Mike, that there's an error in my book on page 25, and I misread a text that a reader has since pointed out to me. Yeah. But what the text says is that that David had an option of a long famine or a war or 3 days of pestilence, and he chose 3 days of pestilence because he said, I would rather risk the mercy of God than I would human warfare or human famine. So even in the midst of those awful choices that he's given, he trusts in the mercy of God. And what I mistakenly said in my book is that there's no report of his having got the pestilence. That is simply wrong because I missed the text. But even so, when you look at how the pestilence gets enacted against David, the way it is described, even that is permeated with God's mercy, so that David is portrayed, for all of his cunning and calculation, he really is a character of incredible faith, and he believes that in the long run, the mercy of God is more generous and more reliable than he's going to get from any human agent. Mm-hmm. And I think that easily translates into the claims that we make for the gospel, that it is finally the graciousness and the mercy of God upon which we have to stake our lives.
Yes. When the unknowable, unsearchable holiness of God it's always been at work in the world, but there are times we see it more clearly. What is the proper response of the people of God? What do you see in the Hebrew Scriptures that points us in the ways in which faithful response or faithful witness looks? How does that look?
Well, I think it begins in humility with the recognition that we are penultimate and we are not ultimate. We are not self-sufficient. We are not self-made. And then, if you begin with the assumption that God is generous, then the proper human response is generous gratitude in response. And the way I extrapolate that then, if we are to practice gratitude, the way we practice gratitude is to have policies and practices that share our common resources with all of our neighbors, and particularly neighbors in need. So I think policies like that are exactly a response to what we confess about the goodness and the generosity and the graciousness of God. And I think that our common parsimony about public matters is a very poor response to the generosity of God.
So we're recording this in the midst of not just the pandemic and not just economic trouble, but in the midst of really deep and hard racial tension in our country. Do you see that tension as evidence of the failure of kind of what you're speaking, the failure to enact policies and laws that are grounded in gratitude towards a generous God?
I do. I think that our policies are still driven by white supremacy, which assumes that white people are entitled to all of the goodies. It's a legacy of slavery and all of that. And I have no doubt that we will continue this racist crisis until we come to terms with that and find new ways of reparations and reinstalling people of color into the economy and into the culture of our society. So I think that's heavy lifting and hard work that we have to do.
Well, as an 87-year-old man, you have watched. I mean, these aren't the first upheavals that you've seen over this subject. What's that like watching this episode as opposed to things you've seen in the past?
Well, I think in my lifetime, I was born during the Depression, and then I was young during the Second World War, and then I witnessed the Vietnam War and how that tore us apart. And I think we've had a number of crises that have been an invitation for us to rethink public policy and all of that. And most of the time we have refused that invitation. But my sense, as many people are saying, is that this crisis cuts deeper than any of those crises. And it is a great invitation to us to rethink from the ground up who we want to be as a blessed community. I think that's the work now in front of us.
Yeah, and hard work indeed. Bonnie, Tim, anything?
I was just thinking about this. A friend of we have a mutual friend, Rabbi Nahum.
Oh, really?
Yes, I work with him for spiritual direction.
I talked to him yesterday.
Oh, there you go. So did I.
Yeah.
So we were both on the call with him, just different times. And we had him on the podcast too. We talked to him over Passover and about his book. But he sent me a list of white supremacy culture and like a list of ways that it shows, like characteristics where it shows up. And then anecdotes to those things, like we see it in businesses or we see it in church organizations. And one of the things on that list is it says worship of the written word. So it says like some of how that pans out. If it's not in a memo, it doesn't exist. The organization doesn't take into account or value other ways in which information gets shared. And so I was reading that and I was thinking about what you said about how our favorite way to read the Bible is to basically just say one-to-one relationship with how it was written and how it is now.
Right.
Would you say that some of this culture we're seeing that we have to undo starts with the sacred work of acknowledging that, of the way that we read the text, that maybe we need to read it a different way? And if so, what would be the fruit of that?
Well, the fruit of it, I think, is to pay attention to the long tradition of oral interpretation as distinct from written interpretation, in which people of color have long been doing oral interpretation of the Bible, even though it's basically white people who have done the written interpretation. Yeah. And I think in the Bible itself, there's a wonderful example of that in the book of Kings. Because in the book of Kings, you have this written record of all the kings, and they just go like that over and over. And right in the middle of it are these oral accounts of Elijah and Elisha. And if you look at white interpretation, by and large, the tendency has been to say these stories of Elijah and Elisha are not reliable because they're just legends. And so we dismiss it because it's not written stuff.
Yeah.
And I think eventually the church has to rely on oral communication rather than written communication, which I suppose is why Zoom is so good, because you can do oral interpretation with each other.
Yeah, you really can.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that.
Yep. And of course, the same is true in the New Testament. But basically, what we have about Jesus are oral legends and stories about what he did. It got written down, but what the church always has to do is to try to go back to the oral articulation of that, which gives you great playfulness and freedom about how you understand them.
Yeah, because I think it seems to me the written and the exact denominations using a very certain translation or a very certain thing, in some ways that really serves empire.
It does. It does indeed. Certitude is always a practice of the empire. Yep.
Yeah.
That's true in Star Wars too. I just want to throw that out there.
I was wishing we could play the music right now. Excellent. Tim, you want to throw anything in? No, I really this idea that we're kind of built as inquisitive people. I can't remember how you worded it earlier, but that we ask these questions, but that we tend to also kind of be lazy in that, where we just want to take the text and make it work for whatever is happening now.
Right.
I really appreciate and enjoy this dance, like trying to understand the deeper facets of faith, or a deeper faith that we're called to, and that so much of that is continuing to ask questions, but part of asking questions is doing the work of how it should be read and doing the work of how it should be pursued. And I like that, because I think there's a really intimate dance there between the way that God reveals and what is required of our pursuit in that revelation, I guess.
Right.
I've been enjoying, I listened to a couple conversations with you and also with Eugene Peterson about kind of the use of poetry and the prophets and metaphor and the way that God speaks kind of cryptically in this way that requires us to listen and then to like kind of dig at it.
Right.
And I love the way that poets have served that part throughout human history on the human side of the fence of like, we're going to build words and we're going to take the tensions and the struggles of the time period and we're going to wring them out and get kind of the solid blood out of whatever's happening in that time period. And you can go through history and wrestle with the poets in that way. And I love that idea with the prophets, and that God speaks that way, that there's this poetry that takes involvement, and it takes like, you're required to take a breath and to kind of pick at it and sit with it. And
that's right.
So there's not much of a question there as much as I've really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that in the text that you have here. I enjoyed that in the conversations I've listened to. Poetry was like a big piece of my thesis in school, and it's something that I teach. So being able to take a practical thing that I love so much and be like, no, this is the way that God talks to us. There is poetry through everything that we're doing. It's kind of a magical element of this divine relationship that we have.
That's right.
I'm loving it.
Well,
go ahead.
If you think about it, so much of the Bible itself is in poetry.
Yeah.
And what conventional interpretation does is to always try to flatten the poetry into one meaning.
Yeah.
And bad business.
Yeah.
And I like that too. Like I teach at a university here, and I'll shoehorn poetry into the conversations because it helps students in a small way learn how to do like inductive reading and kind of how to really listen to how much one word carries within a sentence or a stanza or whatever. And so it's been really helpful. And I like that idea that in church or in study, if we can teach people how to read like super intentionally
Yeah.
That it doesn't take like a brilliant poetic mind. It just takes sometimes just patience and an intentional spirit to find
That's right.
the way that God is really kind of picking at something. It's just, I don't know. It's very encouraging for me.
Yeah.
We also
I'm glad we're doing the same work.
Yeah.
Good.
We also see the language of protest all over the scriptures, and we see it obviously in our culture these days. Could you speak to the difference between protest and lament versus kind of the complaining of the Israelites? What separates? Because it seems like lament is one of the most fitting responses of the people of God these days to what they're seeing in the world. So what characterizes lament?
Well, lament is really important, but taken by itself, lament is an act of resignation that accepts the pain and the loss. Protest is an act of hope. It acknowledges the trouble, but insists that things have to change. So in protest, there is no resignation, but it is an insistence that something new must emerge here. And I think there are a few laments in the Bible. David lamenting over the death of Jonathan is one of those. But for the most part, what we call laments in the book of Psalms are not acts of resignation because they usually end in an imperative, asking and trusting that God will do something new. So that makes a very different act of rhetoric. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes. And that newness, as you demonstrate in the last chapter of the book, is always preceded by groaning. By groaning, groaning language. Yes. I'd love for you to, if you wouldn't mind, spend a little bit of time on that idea that the virus could simply be an expression of all creation groaning.
Well, I think if you go a pre-scientific way that believes that all creatures, not just human creatures, but all creatures are from God and back to God, then it's easy to see that disorder in the life of the world in all of its forms can speak back to God in pain and in hope and in expectation that God will do some healing and some transforming and eventually will make all things new. It seems to me that's elemental to how biblical faith works. Exactly so. Yep.
But one of the temptations you warn against is rushing through the groaning and the pains of labor to get that's to right. New creation. Why is that a concern?
Well, because you have to dwell there a while, and one of the places you can hear that if you listen to the really slow music of the African American church, they sing many laments, and they're very slow paced about doing it because you have to dwell there and you have to linger there, and you can't rush past it, because if you rush past it, you are probably engaged in denial rather than hope. And I think Paul has this strange business in Romans 5 where he says, patience produces suffering and suffering produces hope. Right. It's astonishing that suffering, out loud suffering, becomes a matrix for hope for a new possibility. It's astonishing. Yeah.
And is that because in protest hope is embedded?
Hope is what?
Hope is embedded in protest?
Yes, I think that's right. Yep. Right. Yep.
Well, back to the you can't rush it, like you have to dwell there. I can confidently say, as the only woman in the room, that is true of giving birth at all. The baby's coming when the baby's coming. There's nothing you can do about that. So,
very good.
It's just true.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, That's fair.
So they're called birth pangs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
No, this is fantastic. Tim or Bonnie, anything else you'd like to hit?
Gosh, no, there's so much to dwell on. I think what would you say? Like, I love everything we talked about here, but I'm aware that so much of it is hitting me a certain way because I'm removed from it. I don't know anybody that suffered from COVID. Yeah. I have friends that are part of the Black community, but I am not Black, and no one in my family is. So some of it, I can think on it in a way that's removed. Yeah. So when all of these things, when they begin to feel really personal, what would you say to someone who's in that position?
That's good.
Well, I think you need neighbors. I think you need neighbors to help you tell the truth and to help you suffer and to help you hope. I think at the hard places in our life, we need companions, and we really are with our quarantining and all of that. It feels like we're under house arrest and we're isolated from each other. But being connected to each other is really important.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
Excellent. Tim, any last words from you, bud?
Yeah, I know. I don't want to keep you too long. I want to ask just one little question. A conversation that we've been having quite a bit through this time period has been about prayer. And we've had a lot of different approaches or opinions, or I don't know, however you want to describe it. But that was a chapter that I read in here a couple times where you kind of wrestle with the idea of what it means to pray or what role prayer plays in this.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you could just give a little bit, because we've been having that conversation, just a little bit about, like, what do we pray right now, and what does prayer do, and how does God interact with these prayers? We touched a little bit with lament, but just in general, I think a lot of people have just been like, I don't know what to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the assumption of a biblical prayer is that the conversation we continue to have with God is the most important practice of our life. So that conversation has to be no holds barred about truth telling and about hope telling. So our prayers include thanks, and they also include petition and intercession on the assumption that everything in our life has to be referred back to the goodness of God. And I think that sophisticated people pray very timid prayers because we don't really think anything is happening there. But this is a action. This is not a pretend transaction. So it's asking what are the deepest things in my life about which I need to be honest.
I'm so glad you asked that, Tim.
Awesome.
I'm so glad you asked that. Oh, my goodness. Dr. Brueggemann, listen, we bless you and thank you. We are so grateful for your work and for taking some time with us today. You can pick up the book, obviously, on Amazon in either digital format or there's a hard copy, too. And then where can people find you online?
Well, apparently there is a website that a friend of mine runs for me, but I never look at it. I think it must be walterbrueggemann.com or something like that. I don't know.
Nice.
I'm not exactly a techie guy.
Hey, but you're Zooming with us, so we're grateful. We're grateful for that. Yes.
Right.
Listen, many blessings upon you. Stay safe and keep writing, okay?
Thank you. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you
too.
very
Thank
much.
you
Dr.
so
Brueggemann.
much.
Bye now.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. The Vox Podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Vox Podcast. You can also engage with the hosts on social media at facebook.com/Vox Podcast, on Instagram at Vox Podcast, and on Twitter at Mike Erie. Thank you for walking this road with us.